Yes, the Children's Ministry Security Briefing begins now. Thank you for taking time to watch this important video, and thank you even more for serving in our children's ministry. Our mission is that we want every child who comes through our doors to feel love, come to know Christ, and to find a place where they can grow through fun and life-changing experiences. However, we have a responsibility to do this in an environment that is both safe and secure. The guidelines that I'm about to share with you have been designed not only to keep our kids safe, but to protect you as well. We not only want to prevent any negative situation from occurring with our children, but also to protect our volunteers from any false accusations which can be the result of not following these guidelines. What I'm about to share with you are not just tips. They are not suggestions. They are guidelines that must be followed by every volunteer in our children's ministry. Failure to follow these guidelines can result in a volunteer being lovingly and graciously asked to serve in another ministry of the church, where the risk to kids, volunteers, and liability to the church as a whole is not as high. So thank you for listening carefully and making every effort to be mindful of these guidelines. So let's get started. The first is probably the most important, and it is what we simply call the never alone policy. Under no circumstances are you ever to allow a situation where you are alone with a child. Should you ever find a situation developing where you would be alone with a child, you should do whatever it takes to prevent this from happening. For example, perhaps kids are being picked up and there'll soon be only one child left and the other volunteer says they have to leave. You should ask that volunteer to stay, or ask a parent to stay, or move with the last child out into the hallway as you wait for the final parent so that you are around other adults. The point is, you do whatever it takes to make sure you are never alone with a child. Always make sure that there are at least two adults and that you are in clear view of other adults whenever you are with children. This is not only for the protection of the children so that they are never at risk, but it is also to protect you and make it impossible for you to ever be accused of inappropriate conduct with a child. There can never be any exceptions to this rule. I am sure you have heard of tragic situations in the news involving staff or volunteers at churches acting inappropriately with children. In those stories, this rule has always been broken. That is why no exceptions can ever be made and why we must take action if this rule is violated. Thank you for taking this seriously. Next is the principle of appropriate touch. As we interact with children, we must always be wise in our physical contact. Please understand, appropriate affection is important. We want kids to feel loved and accepted. High fives, fist bumps, hugs, pats on the back, and other forms of casual affection are fine. But as kids get older, hugs shift to the side. We avoid having kids sitting on our laps, riding piggyback, or sitting on our shoulders. We want to always be above reproach in our physical contact with children. If in doubt, don't. Or feel free to ask. This includes that we never use physical discipline in correcting children. Even if a child is your own, do not use physical discipline, as observers may not know that that is your child. Again, this is not only to protect the children, but to protect you from anyone being concerned about your conduct with children. If you ever have a concern about somebody's conduct with children, never hesitate to talk to the children's ministry staff. They will listen and deal with it confidentially. Better to report it and have it end up being nothing than to wish you had later. We are happy to coach individuals in appropriate conduct. A person will not be automatically removed. Sometimes they just need some guidance, and your confidential input is helpful. Next, as we interact and have fun leading and teaching kids, please always be thinking about safety. There are two questions you should always be asking yourself. The first is this safe? Obviously, we're always trying to make sure that the activities that we're doing will not hurt a child. But just as important is the second question. Does this look safe? Sometimes what we're doing may be perfectly safe, but it may not look safe to an observer. This could make others feel uncomfortable, even while we're confident that nothing could go wrong. There are times when we may choose not to do something simply because we do not want to cause others to be uneasy, especially parents. And injuries do happen, and when they do, always report them to your supervisor, no matter how small the injury. If the skin is broken, then an accident report should be filled out. The parent should always be informed, regardless of how big or little the injury may be. We would rather tell a parent about the incident than to have them discover a boo-boo when they get home and be left wondering what happened. Parents are understanding and appreciative when we're upfront about accidents. Next, I would like to talk about the importance of those security stickers. These are very important, and they are the cornerstone of our secure check-in system. First of all, no child should be admitted into a classroom without a check-in sticker. If a child does not have a sticker, they should not be accepted into the classroom. Please ask the parent to go check in or register. Also, no adult should be in the classroom without appropriate volunteer identification. Parents who are dropping off a child should not come in any further than the doorway when they're saying goodbye to their child. One easy way to make sure that children have a name tag is to make a habit of greeting them by name. And as you do so, please note any special information on the child's name tag. There may be an allergy that is very important to make note of. We do not want to cause an allergic reaction during snack time. Lastly, and this is perhaps the most important part of our secure check-in system, no child is ever to be released to an adult without that adult having the matching security tag. Knowing the parent is not acceptable. You must check the tag every time. If a parent does not have the tag, you may not release the child. Smile, be polite, but stick to the policy. Do not accept any excuses. Kindly send them back to the check-in counter and they will resolve whatever the issue may be. Check-in staff can figure out who the authorized adult is and they can reprint a check-in tag. A classroom teacher does not have the authority to bypass this policy. Only the check-in counter staff can do this. Again, this is for your protection as well as the child. You do not want to be the person who released a child into the custody of an adult who did not have legal permission to pick up that child. Yes, this can be awkward and inconvenient, but it's far less awkward than finding out later that you were used by someone to take a child illegally. You do not know what's going on in the home, or if there's a legal issue going on, or a restraining order. You know, churches are one of the primary places that children are abducted by an estranged parent because churches too often value friendliness over security. We will not make that mistake. I don't mean to frighten you, but it only takes one lawsuit to close the doors of a church. I take that back. It doesn't hurt to be a little frightened. We have to have a sober understanding of the seriousness of this issue. Obviously, these situations are rare, but once we start making exceptions on an individual basis based on personal knowledge of a family, we open ourselves up to being vulnerable. So we have to follow this policy across the board every time to protect every child. Let me also mention something about building security. Once in a while, you may have somebody trying to enter the building through a side door into a children's ministry room. Never permit such a shortcut, even if you know the person. Simply motion or ask them to go around the building and enter through a main entrance. Lastly, I want to encourage you to count. As a children's ministry leader, you should always know the number of children who are under your care. Constantly be counting as children are regularly being added to your room. In the case of an emergency, you will not have time to count during an evacuation. So you'll want to know how many kids are in your care at all times, especially if you're transporting children to another location during class time. Count before you go Stop and count in the middle of transition. Count again when you reach your destination. And do the same thing on the way back. With preschoolers who love to count, you just have fun with it. Honestly, you can't count too many times. A leader should be able to ask you how many kids you have in your class at any time, and you should be able to answer. Well, thank you for your focused attention to these important details. I know this is a lot to digest. Let me encourage you to re-watch this video so you are familiar with these guidelines. You are responsible to know and follow them. Make sure you also have read and signed our children's ministry policy, which goes into much greater detail. In closing, when parents drop their children off in our children's ministry programs, they are entrusting us with their greatest treasure. We need to accept that trust with the highest sense of stewardship and take it seriously. Children's ministry is incredibly fun, and yet it is super serious business too. Thank you for the love and care and heart and preparation and effort and creativity and seriousness that you put into ministering to the kids who come to our church. Let's work together to provide a loving, safe, and secure place where kids can come to know Jesus and grow in their knowledge of Him. Yes, the Children's Ministry Security Briefing has concluded.